Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a Windows user's first impressions on using Linux Mint as a full-time operating system. And also, welcome to the first video on this channel. Hope you guys enjoy, subscribe, and let's kick off today's video. Because basically what we're going over is me switching to Linux Mint full-time as my main OS on my gaming PC, and kind of give you how I feel and things that I enjoyed about it, things I didn't enjoy about it. And then I'm also going to go over the installation process of Linux Mint for some new users that might be looking into joining the Linux cult. Is it a cult? It's kind of a cult, but it's kind of a cool cult. You guys are some pretty cool people. But let's start off by giving an introduction of myself a little bit, because basically I am a longtime Windows user. I've been using Windows for years now. Since I've been building computers, I've been installing Windows. And recently is when I decided to make the jump. I've been thinking about it for a few years now. Like, I've been testing out Linux Mint, Ubuntu, Manjaro, so on and so forth on a myriad of devices for years now, but I've never made the full-time switch of using it as my main operating system. I've given it a try once or twice, but every time something threw me off or something happened or something broke, I would just go back to Windows and not use Linux forever, and then my install would get messed up because I haven't updated anything in forever, and then I just fresh install it again. And I went into this, cycle of distro hopping and trying new things over and over and over until really recently I got a 2 terabyte SSD to install my Mint install and pretty much everything on Mint. Because one of my biggest issues is beforehand I had like a 250 gig SSD for Mint, and then I had a 1 terabyte drive for games and larger files. Well, I had a lot of issues on Mint trying to get a secondary drive to just stay connected, and I know someone out there is going to tell me an easy way to do it or what I was doing wrong, but I just couldn't get it to work. So I thought the easiest way for me to fix that issue essentially is just to get a massive drive. And so far 2 terabytes has been enough. I've used about a terabyte of it and have like another terabyte free, or a little under a terabyte, and it's been honestly the best way that I could have done a Linux install, because nothing really breaks when it's on one drive and it's all on the main OS. And I do backups all the time, so if anything ever happens, I can just restore a backup on that 1 terabyte drive I was telling you about. I just use it as a backup drive now. And honestly, it's been a fantastic experience. Linux Mint has been very snappy, as long as you keep everything updated, which I'm very OCD about it. I see that update in the bottom right corner, and I update literally every single day. And it's been a fantastic experience so far. Like, I've had really no major issues with it, and everything that I do on a day-to-day basis works just fine, which is mostly gaming, listening to music, going on Discord, going on the internet. Things like that are stuff that I do on a daily basis, which really, you could do that on a potato, but really it's one of those things where the hardest thing to get used to is going to be what I'm doing now, which is making videos, because I'm used to a Windows file manager, used to a Windows workflow, and I'm not used to using Kdenlive, which is what I'm going to be trying to use to edit this video. And yeah, it's going to be a really new experience for me, and I'm happy you guys can enjoy this journey, because I'm definitely going to be making a lot more videos, not only on Mint, but I want to go over other distros and things like my Steam Deck. I want to do tutorial videos on, and maybe even some game reviews and game overviews on how they run on the actual Steam Deck. And so yeah, hope you guys enjoy the channel, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of this video, because we're going to move on to the install of Linux Mint. Let's move over to the actual grub menu that I got going up now. I'm going to be doing this all in a virtual machine, just because it's the easiest way for me to record and install for you guys. So let's move on over to that right now. Okay guys, here we are in the grub menu for Linux Mint. This is how it's going to look when you get that USB drive plugged into your PC. You boot into it, and this is going to be pretty much the first thing you see. And we're just going to go over and do Start Linux Mint 21.1. This is the latest download that I got from Linux Mint's website, so it is a pretty up-to-date install. And honestly, even in this virtual machine, it loads fairly quick. We're just going to go ahead and display settings and make sure this is 1920 by 1080. There we go. We're going to keep that configuration. And when you're in this little environment, test environment, you can really get a good feel of what Linux Mint looks like. You can go through the settings. You can make sure your network works, which my PC is hardwired in, so the virtual machine already sees it right away. And you can get an idea for the file system and the way everything looks, because I've actually yet to really look at 21.1. I just updated my system yesterday, but since I have already done a bunch of changes to it, I don't think I'm going to really see what it looks like from a new user perspective. But we're just going to go ahead and run through the install as well. So let's go ahead and install Linux Mint. Let this do its little bit of loading. And honestly, I would borderline say that installing Linux Mint is easier than installing Windows. You're just going to hit your language again for your keyboard layout. And then I always do install multimedia codecs, and that's just to make sure that video formats and rendering websites and everything like that just works. I've never not installed it, so I don't know if it breaks anything if I don't, but I know when I do it works, so I always install it. Go ahead and run through that continue. And for most installs, you will be erasing the disk if you're going to be using it as your main install. You can boot this side by side with other Linux distros and Windows, but I personally find it easier to have two separate drives for Windows and Linux, and even Linux and Linux, just because I've never found a use case where I would want to partition a single drive. Some people do it, I don't. It's really up to personal preference. But we're going to go ahead and install disk, or erase disk, and install Linux Mint. Go ahead and continue. And then we're going to continue with that. And then we're just going to set this up as, let's just say, Linux Mint test. And then do a nice simple password, which I'm going to change that. And then I always do login automatically. You can always do require my password at login, but it really depends on the environment you're in, if you can trust the people around you, so on and so forth. I personally just always log in automatically because I don't really care who just gets into my system right away. I'm not hiding anything. So I'm going to go ahead and let this finish up, and once we get back to the actual desktop, then I will be right back. Okay guys, welcome back. This is the full install of Linux Mint, and this is going to be the first bit of dialogue that you see when you go ahead and install Mint. And I think every new user should run through it, because it gives you a little bit of a welcome to it. It gives you your first steps that you're going to want to do, which is changing the themes of your desktop. So changing it to like dark mode, whether you want a modern or a traditional look. I personally like that traditional, or modern, I should say. Actually, traditional looks a little bit Windows 7-esque. Go ahead and get understanding with your system snapshots, which is essentially just going to be backups and things like that. And then make sure if you have like NVIDIA cards, you can go through the driver manager to make sure that all your drivers are up to date and everything is running smoothly. Go through your update manager to make sure all your packages and PPAs and everything are up to date. And then you can run through the system settings and the software manager just to kind of get an understanding of what it all looks like. And then that firewall, if you do want to set one of those up. Gives you a little bit more documentation about the release, the new features, the patch notes, any help you're looking for, and then if you want to, I'm assuming, donate, things like that, or help them in any way, shape, or form. And that's essentially it. That's going to be the setup menu. It's all very easy. And that's what I like about Linux Mint, is it just gives you a straightforward setup. It's a very Windows feel, which is what Cinnamon as a desktop environment is fantastic for, especially if you have that Windows mentality to the way your desktop should look. And everything is laid out very simple, and that's overall why I like Linux Mint. Is it's just a simple, easy to use desktop environment. And I absolutely love the install process. But I'm going to move over to a little simple pros and cons as to why Linux Mint was the switch for me, and give you a little bit of an overview as to why I stuck with it. So yeah, Essentially, the initial pros for everything is the ease of install. As you saw, it is a super easy install process. It doesn't get much easier than that. It walks you through it like nothing. Um, and as a former Windows user, as much as I do like using the terminal, I'm not like scared to use the terminal and install things like that. Like, I'm not terrified to go ahead and just go through the terminal and type in commands and download things and update, because no matter how you look at it, if you're going to Linux, you're going to have to do that at some point. There's going to be some software that's not in the package manager, and you're going to want to install those packages another way, and that's going to be the best, safest way to do it. But that being said, the package manager is a really nice addition. It has been probably one of the easiest things to use, and gives you all the software you could really use, like downloading Discord, downloading Steam, even downloading things like Minecraft I did off the package manager, because it was all just there, and that just made the whole installation process and use of Mint that much easier. The next biggest thing is going to be the decent library of software, which you're going to get really out of any Debian-based, Ubuntu-based distro. It's not like only Linux Mint has these type of packages, but it's nice that, it is incorporated in general. You have more than enough software to do all your day-to-day tasks, in my opinion. I also am a big fan of free open source software, so I use GIMP, I use LibreOffice, Audacity is what I'm using to record this, OBS is what I'm using to record the screen and the video, and I'm going to be using Kdenlive to be editing this. So I am just really big into open source software and free software, especially when it's done right. It really gives the paid for software a run for their money, like all the Adobe suite, the Microsoft Office, things like that. Really makes you question, why are we paying so much money for this software when there's such great free alternatives? And if you want to give money to them, they'll accept it, don't get me wrong, to help the project go, but they're not requiring it, which I just love in general as Linux, and just overall how that feels. It's a really good, different dynamic than what I'm used to. Other great things about Mint are, and I'm going to put this together, the stability and the community. Linux Mint is kind of hard to break, and that's really with any Debian-based distro. The only way I broke it is by simply not using it and then not updating a install for a long time, and it kind of broke the update manager, and I had to do some fiddling with the terminal to get everything up to date so it would upgrade itself to a newer version of Mint. But like I said, as long as you keep your things up to date, and I would say every day, every other day, maybe even once a week, just update your system and you'll be good to go. Everything will be running pretty smoothly. And then the community. I have not met a nicer community of people. There is a Discord for the Linux Mint Discord that I will actually link down in the description below, so you guys can actually join that Discord. You can also see me in there every once in a while talking, asking questions, things like that. And that's a wonderful resource. They have been some of the nicest group of people I've ever met, and they've really helped me out quite a bit. And sometimes they're just fun to talk to, honestly, just to joke around and mess around in the Discord. But those are some of the main reasonings why I like Mint, and just the fact that I'm not going to be forced to upgrade my system all the time. Like, eventually, long-term support does end up going by the wayside. Like, I think the 21.1 is going to like 2027, if I'm correct. And then, you'll probably have to move on to whatever the latest install is, but that's a pretty long time away. And they're not going to just probably completely kill it like Windows does. And that's why I like Linux. It's just one of those things where the stability, and you kind of get what you want out of it. Like, you can really do what you want with Mint and other Linux distros that you can't do with Windows. And that's just kind of awesome. But let's move on to the cons, because honestly, there's not a lot of them. Because one of the main ones, in my opinion, is just some software doesn't work. But that's what you gotta kind of get used to when it comes to Mint. Like, there's some games that I wanted to play that just simply don't work on Linux at all. Like, I got into Battlefield 2042 before I switched over. Can't play that game at all. Call of Duty, nah, can't play even a little bit. except maybe some older CODs like COD 4, World at War, Black Ops, you might be able to get running because the anti-cheats aren't that bad. Games like New World, I put endless amounts of hours in New World last year, and it works, but not well, and I can't find a good fix for it. And then, like I said, if you don't update it for a long time, then it can break itself for the installs, and you have to do a little bit of fiddling with the terminal, which is things I didn't really have to do on Windows. They had updates down to a T. And then, there's little annoyances here and there. Like when I did a full upgrade to 21.1 from 21, it kind of uninstalled some things. Like my Minecraft got completely uninstalled. I think I used Balena Etcher. It got completely uninstalled. But I just had to go back through and install those. And as long as I didn't completely uninstall some of my main software, I didn't really care personally. I'm a tinkerer, so I'm more than happy to tinker around in settings and get things working. But those are just some of my main gripes, honestly. Other than that, there's not much to be angry with. Like, it runs smoothly as all hell. It boots up super quick. And so far, so good. I've had no major issues. And again, I have tinkered with Linux on and off for a number of years. So I'm not a total noob at this. I'm not completely learning how to do this from scratch again. But using it as my main desktop environment has been a great experience, and I encourage everybody to give it a try. Honestly, the only people that I wouldn't suggest things like Linux to are things like, let's say my sister and her boyfriend. They use software that only works on Windows. Mainly the Adobe suite of products is what he uses. He's been using Photoshop since he was like 15, and I can't break him from it. So he is going to be a Windows user as long as Adobe exists. And then Mac people are Mac people. If you like your Mac, you like your Mac. But someone who wants to get away from Windows and someone who wants to try something different but still be kind of what you're used to, then I think Linux Mint is the best way to go. There are other options like Zorin OS, Pop OS, etc., that are also pretty stable, but still very different. Pop OS and Zorin, I think, feel a little different from Windows to the point where making the full switch might be kind of hard. So this is a good first introduction to Linux, and it's what got me into it. Installing Mint on literally anything I can get my hands on. And recently I've tried other distros like Debian, which I'm going to get into in another video, and things like that. But I think that's it for today's video, guys. Thank you for listening to me ramble and talk about my first experiences with Linux Mint and kind of my background as to why I'm making this video in this channel. Be looking forward to more videos from me. I'm hoping to upload maybe once or twice a week and see what we can kind of get our minds into and see what other Linuxy fun we can kind of do. Because, I might do some tutorials on how to set up things on Linux. I might do some overall distro reviews and looks into distros. And I might even do some Steam Deck content because I do love my Steam Deck. But if you guys did enjoy this video, please hit that like button and subscribe. And I have been The Poor Gamer, and peace out, everybody.